So a lot of people have asked me how I go about wet mounting a roll of film onto a drum for drum scanning. So the drum I'm using today is an ICG drum for an ICG 360. Um, the all the drums are pretty much the same. They're just different sizes. So the ICG drums are a lot bigger. So first, to get started, you have to put the sheet of mylar onto the drum and line it up with this line here. And then take a piece of tape and tape it onto it. I've already done this step, but basically tape it perfectly onto here, starting from the center and kind of working your way out so there's no bubbles. Then what you do is you put um, this lever down, and this kind of mechanism is pretty much on all the drum mounting stations. And you usually want to mount it in a portrait orientation versus a landscape. Most of the drums are not even big enough to mount it in a landscape orientation, and I'll show you why in a second. So next you want to fold it over, and then you take your film. I usually, when I get it developed at the lab, I usually keep it in the sleeves until I am about to mount it, just so there's no dust that gets on it. You take it out of the sleeves, and you always want to mount it emulsion side down. And the easiest way to tell is um, where where you can read it, the right side up. So, and you spin it a little bit until it gets just past the line. I usually look kind of under the drum to see where it's just past the line. There's two ways of mounting it here. If you have 6x6 negatives, it's pretty easy. You can mount it like this. If you have a roll of three, strip of three 6x6 negatives. Now the issue is with 6x7 and larger, you kind of want to mount it like this because, as you can see, these mylar sheets, they do sell bigger mylar sheets as well, but these are kind of the average size, and the average size drum is an 8x10 drum. This is a 12x18 drum. And most drum scanners don't have drums this big. It's usually just the ICGs and the like tangos and a lot of the upright, mostly the upright drum scanners. But so as you can see, the problem here is that it's really at the edge here, and if you just have a little bit more of the register on the sides, then it'll actually go over it. So what you do is, what I do with the larger negatives like this, is I actually mount them in a landscape orientation. Now, usually you don't want to have more than three strips, unless it's maybe 645, then you can manage four. And like I said, for 645 and 6x6, you could usually do it horizontally. Also, for 35 millimeter, strips of 5 usually work the best in terms of horizontal. Um, Vertical, you can maybe get away with strips of 6. But for 35 millimeter, I prefer to mount it horizontally just because it's easier to straighten it out. And so as you can see, you want to get it as straight as possible. And this is why this grid helps. This grid is not always available in every drum mounting station, but I think most of them will have it. So you basically kind of just tuck it in, go to the next one. You can usually mount about 3 of these strips, at least for 6x7. And for 4x5, it's basically the same principle. The only difference is that for like 4x5 and 8x10, the only difference is that you would have like individual pieces. So for 4x5, I would mount it like this individually. 8x10, you would obviously mount it in a portrait orientation like this. And you can also use mixed medium. So for example, I'm using 2 negatives and 1 slide. And so you kind of want to space it out somewhat evenly. It doesn't have to be perfect. So after you've lined up your strips of film, what you want to do is you want to put the mounting fluid on top and on bottom. You don't need to use a lot. Stuff lasts for a long time. And the fluid that I use is not the cami stuff. It's a much better fluid that's better for you and the environment, and for your negatives. It's the Scan Science Lumina fluid, which is very similar, and I hear almost the same as Gamsol. If you can't get the Scan Science stuff, the Gamsol is cheaper and should be very similar to that. So what you do is you hold this down. You go in little by little, and I usually just add a little bit more, like in the middle, kind of as well. Just go in like this. Once you reach the end, you want to wipe, because you're going to have some of the scanning fluid on the drum outside of the mounting area, and you're going to want to wipe it down here so that you can tape it. And you want to use the tape that's kind of chemically resistant, so it's a special tape that you can buy. So you rub here, you start in the middle with these tape things, and this will actually reduce the bubbles. So you go like this. Next one, pull down. And you just pull down like this until you get to one end and the other end. And you can see the fluid will start coming out a little bit more. This is very important. So once that's done, you release the roller. And then what you do is you kind of wipe the drum off, because you're going to be putting a long strip of tape along the sides. And when you're putting it on the sides, along the sides, you want to be sure to pull down. If you can see, the bubbles are going down with this. This basically seals it, because you don't want any of this getting all over your drum scanner, and you don't want it evaporating while it's scanning. Wipe it down a bit more, and then the final seal is at the end here, where you have your pieces of tape. There we go. Now it's all sealed up. So the next step is just to wipe it down, wipe off any excess fluid. And then what I do is I take another cloth, clean one, and I just wipe the fluid off. And then this is a really neat trick. In order not to get dust, I use this plastic Sheen and Shine. You just have to put like literally just a couple of drops. You don't even put it on the drum. You don't have to. You can actually put it on the drum. But what this does is it makes this a little bit more transparent and clear, the Mylar. It also gets rid of the smudges from the mounting fluid. And as you can see, there are 0 bubbles of any sort, thanks to this tape method, basically, of pulling it down, pulling it straight. And you go in and do the same thing on the inside, and voila, it's all done. Usually it just takes me a couple minutes, really, when I'm just doing it on my own, but obviously this is an explainer video, so I was working a lot slower in order to explain it. So I hope this was helpful, and that it'll help you learn how to mount your own drum.